Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Marketing Practice Podcast, the podcast where I get to simplify the marketing and the mindset for chiropractors so they can make more money, have more impact, and bring a whole bunch more joy into their lives and practices too. Now, if I've got my timing right, it should be just after Christmas when you're listening to this. In fact, you could be listening to it at any time, but it will be released just a couple of days after Christmas. So Merry Christmas. Happy festive season. I hope you and your family are enjoying the break. This time of year, many of us start to think about the year ahead. We're a week or so before New Year's Eve. Many of you will be thinking about New Year's resolutions. And I think before we start on thinking about what's to come ahead, it makes a lot of sense for us to do a bit of a reconcile on what's happened behind us. There's a quote I love. I think it might be from Nathaniel Brandon that says, "You can't leave a place that you've never been." If we're going on a journey somewhere, in order to find out the directions of how to get there, we need to know where we are first. In today's episode, I'm going to share with you the same year review that I do. In fact, I've done this review just a week or so ago, and I'm going to share with you the questions I ask myself, and I'm going to share you the results as well. Now, I will have all of these questions for you on the web page associated with this episode. So head on over to anguspyke.com/podcast, and I think this will probably be episode maybe 239. But anyway, the link to the page for you to get access to these questions will be there. But maybe as you're driving along, as you're going for a walk, or maybe you're kicking back on the beach, for those of you that might be Aussies, or whatever you're doing this Christmas time, maybe as I'm going through these questions, it might be valuable for you to ask yourself these same questions. It might change what you think you need to focus on for 2022. It might provide some direction. I find this process really valuable. In fact, I do a small version of this process at the end of each week, so I can celebrate what went well, I can learn from what didn't go so great, and it can help to refocus me. So that's enough talking. Let's jump into what these questions are, and I'll share my answer. So the first question is this, what are 3 great things that happened this year? This was really easy for me. So in no particular order from here, I sold the practice. This had been something that had been in the pipe works for me for probably the last 5 years. And I did an earlier episode where I spoke all about that and just how difficult it was for me to come to that decision. So much of my identity was as a chiropractor. And if I were to step outside of the practice, what would that mean for my identity? If I wasn't a chiropractor anymore, who was I? And so I had to really wrestle with a lot of things there, one of which was coming into the realization that chiropractic was just one of those things that I did. It wasn't who I was. But because I'd been so involved in chiropractic, in politics and speaking from the stage and teaching, you name it, almost all aspects of chiropractic I've been involved in, that was something I had to really work my way through. I moved from Melbourne down to the beach to a small coastal town called Barwon Heads. Again, that was big for me also because I was moving away from where the kids were staying, so my 2 grown-ups, Mackenzie and Edison. Now, as it turns out, Mackenzie is going to be making her way over to the UK. In fact, probably the day that this episode releases, all going well, she'll be hopping on a plane and heading over to London. And my beautiful boy Edison, who's 19 in 2022, is heading over to Adelaide, and he's studying chiropractic. So they wouldn't have been there anyway. So funny how things turn out with that too. And the third thing that really comes to mind in terms of great things that happened in 2021 was the birth of our beautiful boy, Sonny. Now, while it has been wonderful to have Sonny come into the world, one of the things that has been beautiful about it has been watching Lauren be a mum. I am constantly blown away by just the love and the patience that she has for him, the way that she just looks on at him with adoration, regardless of whether they've been up multiple times during the night or they've had a great sleep. She just never seems to fuss. She just looks and loves this boy. And obviously I love him too, but watching a mother with her child is something that's extraordinary. So they were 3 really easy things for me to celebrate from 2021. You know, really big steps, certainly the selling of the practice and the moving down to Barwon Heads. The next question I asked myself were, what were the main struggles that I had throughout 2021? And again, I've chosen 2 things here as well. So it has been, whilst one of the great things has been getting out of practice and moving into kind of full-time working from home as well. Transitioning into working from home particularly has had lots of distractions. So in the past, there were 2 or 3 days a week I worked from home anyway, but on those days I worked from home, Lauren wasn't there. I had the house to myself. And so it was really easy for me to be productive and get lots of stuff done. But now I've got 2 fabulous distractions. I've got my gorgeous wife and I've got my stunning boy. And he's always up for cuddles. And there's always things that I can do to help Lauren and Sunny as well, whether that be changing a nappy, helping out with a feed, or just kind of cleaning the house. There are distractions there for me all the time. And particularly in the first couple of months of Sunny being born, I had to really lower my expectations in terms of what I wanted to get done. And I found that really frustrating and challenging because I like to get stuff done. I really enjoy my work and I wasn't getting stuff done. And so I was really beating myself up about that. I'm going to talk about in our next question, we're going to address how to deal with these challenges. The second one, and again, that's hardly a huge challenge. I realise that that's very much a first world problem there too. The second one has been much bigger, and many of you might be able to relate with this because it's been a common challenge. I put it under the umbrella, it's staying at cause. COVID originally, remember it was going to be kind of 12 weeks, we were going to flatten the curve and get on. Well, here we are 2 years into it. Curve doesn't look like it's flattening, and some places around the world are learning to live with it, and others are still coping with what's going on. We start to calm down a little bit and then the scare factor goes up again. I want to introduce you to a concept that we've touched on before called emotional childhood versus emotional maturity or emotional adulthood. As kids, we're really at the result of everything, that we think that somebody else makes us mad, somebody else makes us sad, that everything around us is what causes who we are. Now, as adults, we often take in that same level of emotional maturity that, my boss makes life tough for me, my husband is terrible, work is difficult, COVID makes things hard to run a business, is that we are at the effect of life. And in the coaching that I do, I refer to this as emotional childhood. Now, emotional maturity is the opposite of that says that it's not the circumstances, it's not the environment around me that causes me to feel one way or another. It's my thoughts, it's my interpretations. Again, I did a whole episode that COVID isn't making your business hard to run. What's making your business hard to run is your thoughts in around COVID. There are plenty of businesses around the world, many that I'm coaching with, that are thriving right now. And of course, there are others that are failing. It's not COVID, they're all in the same environment. It's their thoughts in around COVID. Now, I'm not immune to this. There have been times, particularly over this last 2 months, that I have found myself being really pulled down by COVID. I've found myself very much in what's referred to as emotional childhood. The frustration, the anger, the stress. When is this ever going to end? I can't travel. I can't move around with the freedom that I had beforehand. And then there have been a lot of mandates that have come down here in Australia as well. And so I was feeling like, and have been feeling like, I had very little choice. And when we don't feel like we have choice in life, it's very hard to be happy. So I have been working very, very hard of recent, particularly over this last 6 weeks, reminding myself I'm always at choice. Even with these mandates, I have a choice. I have a choice to stay in Australia, to leave Australia. I have a choice of how I interact with these mandates. And bringing choice back to me has allowed me to move back into an emotional adulthood. It's brought a great deal of peace back to me as well. So the 2 big challenges for me again have been dealing with the distractions of working at home all the time and having family at home with me. And 2 is staying at cause and staying in emotional adulthood as well. The next question I ask myself is, if I were to mentor somebody dealing with these same things, what would I tell them? Now, this question is important. It's interesting, and I've done this with some of my coaching clients, because immediately when I talk about what my struggles and challenges were beforehand, there's a tendency for me to want to beat myself up, tell myself I didn't get as much done as what I should have got done, and that I've been distracted and you haven't hit your goals, and then that I should have known to be more mature with my thinking, and how did I let myself kind of get drawn back into this again? And so I should have been able to do those kind of things. And so again, you can see there, and even if you go back and listen to what I said before, there is this very judgmental nature that happens. But the moment we change that question over just a little bit to, if I were to mentor somebody else who is dealing with these same challenges, we move into compassion. we move into empathy. And self-judgment never gets us to where we want to be. It's very interesting. They've done a lot of this work with people who are drug addicted, alcoholics, and other forms of drugs as well. And when they become more compassionate about their behavior, when they might have had a slip up, their chance of long-term sobriety increases significantly. So this same thing happens if you're looking back on the year and the difficulties that you've had, and you're really beating yourself up about them, because there can be a tendency. You're thinking, oh, we're about to roll into 2022. I had all these great goals for 2021. I didn't achieve them. Then that stinking thinking comes in. So compassion and empathy is always the solution. And so when I think back, if I look over those two scenarios, the challenges in terms of the distractions there's two things that really come up for me. Obviously, this is a very special time that won't go on forever with regards to having Sunny and Lauren at home, and particularly with Sunny being so small. And so I needed to remind myself that the whole reason I wanted to work from home was because of the freedom and the flexibility that comes along with it, and to really enjoy those times, to savor them, because they don't last forever. And I know that having a 19 and 21-year-old, just how quickly those times go. The second part of that as well is for me to realize what times and what projects are non-negotiable, and then for me to just communicate that with Lauren. So for instance, just before recording this podcast, I went out to Lauren and said, hey, I'm about to record a podcast now. Please don't distract me with cuddles. I can't help for the next 45 minutes because I'll be busy doing this. And she's super understanding about that. And so just articulating when I have these no interruption times is something that's working really well for me when I go out of my way and actually communicate it to Lauren. The second thing with regards to staying at course with COVID, excuse me, is really for me to make a much stronger boundaries in around what content I'm consuming, who I'm talking to, and what we're talking about. I find myself, if I'm going down a rabbit hole of consuming content on Instagram or YouTube, across the news platforms, all about COVID and what's going on, it never takes me to a happy place. If I'm talking with friends and family the whole time about COVID, again, it never takes me to a happy place. So I've drawn much stronger boundaries there, where what I was telling myself is that I was keeping up to date with what was going on. And really I wasn't learning anything new. I was fueling that fear and that uncertainty that was going on. So, I have got rid of a lot of people that I were following online who seemed to be constantly talking about COVID. And I'm watching the conversations that I'm having in around my friends, that we get ourselves kind of stuck down that COVID path. I'm trying to direct it in other directions. And certainly it's something that I've said to Lauren as well, that, let's not, we've talked about it a lot less over this last month. We've really drawn a line in the sand. Man, I've got the coughs with regards to this too. Excuse me for that. We've really drawn a line in the sand about what we're talking about and how often we check in, those kind of things. So it's interesting that when I go into a bit of compassion and empathy with myself, I can give much better advice, and I don't feel terrible. I don't go into kind of shame because I haven't kind of done what I wanted to do. The next question would be, what are 3 key things that I learnt throughout this year? So here's some of the things that really came up for me. Things are never as bad as what you think they are, or they haven't for me. Now, let me be really cautious with that, because I don't know what's going on for you in your life. Maybe there are really difficult things that you're sitting in at the moment. But I know for me that going through some of the challenges, again, let's go back to the practice and selling the practice. And I imagined how difficult that was going to be. Leaving patients that I'd had 20 plus year relationships with. 1, would somebody buy the practice? 2, how would I get somebody great to take over from me if somebody did buy it? And then how would my patients cope and how would I cope? And all of those just went beautifully. I imagined them to be much worse than what I thought they were going to be. And so there have been other challenges throughout the year. A few weeks ago, some really difficult times to negotiate, that in the moment of sitting inside of it, it felt incredibly difficult. I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast recently, and he was interviewing Jewel, the singer. It's an amazing podcast. I really recommend that you have a listen to it. And as a child, she had a really difficult upbringing. She was suffering with depression at one stage, and she tells the story that she was almost thinking about kind of ending her life. And she was sitting on a cliff top overlooking the ocean, and she was noticing the waves coming in and out, and she noticed the shifts in the tides. And at that moment, what she got a realization of is that everything is transient, that given enough time, and this too will change. It's very much been a great lesson for me this year also, is that in difficult times, I just need to hold on, to breathe, and know that with each hour, sometimes it's more than an hour, sometimes it's more than a day, and sometimes it takes a week or two, is that we can transition and move on through this. So that was a great reminder for me this year as well. The other thing that I've really learned this year is about the importance of focus, particularly based on what I was talking about before with the increased distractions in my life, is that focus is everything. Minimizing distractions. I'm working very hard on my work environment in here, that when I'm recording things like podcast or I'm having focus time, I try to have a minimum of 90 minutes of focus time 4 days a week. So I don't work on a Wednesday, the other 4 days. And focus time is when I'm doing things like this. Podcast is a focus time. Distractions are all turned off. Phones are turned off. My computer is in work mode. Door is closed. I communicate with Lauren during that time. Focus time is time for me to actually grow my business. It's working on things that'll help me have more impact, make more money, and generally expand the business. Too many chiropractors are working in their practice and not on it. I know you've heard that before. Focus time is when you are not with patients, and maybe you're not even in the practice. Focus time is time when you're actually working on solving problems, increasing your income, increasing the impact of your practice, increasing the enjoyment, the reach, those kind of things. How can you make things better at your practice? Now, whilst it's easy for me to get 4 of those focus times in, I recommend to most of my coaching clients that they have minimum of one 90-minute block where you are working on your practice each and every week. And for those of my clients that are doing really great, they're having at least 2 of those. And so this is something that I have doubled down on this year, focus time as well. The other thing that I have really learned this year is the importance of clarity, getting really clear around what is it that I want to achieve. This has had me tighten up my goals a little bit. It's had me tighten up my niche a little bit more. Now, while I deal and share this podcast with lots of natural and alternate health practitioners from around the globe, you might have noticed that there's been a bit of a change in my languaging, where really most of the time I'm talking about chiropractic and chiropractors. I tightened that niche up, okay? I got laser focused on who it is that I'm serving and how I'm going about serving them. Now, this doesn't mean that inside a community influence, I have some beautiful dentists, naturopaths, Chinese med practitioners, but it's mostly chiropractors. And so the same thing will happen for you. If you decide that your focus is on looking after pregnant women or children or athletes, there will be other people that will come and see you, but you need to be known for one thing, okay? And then you can build upon that. The old saying, jack of all trades, master of none. So 3 things that I learned, okay? This too will pass is one of them. Focus is everything. Minimize distraction as well. And that clarity is king. Work out exactly what it is that you want to achieve. Okay, focus on that. And that clarity and focus are things that really go together. After working through those questions there's a little self-rating scale that I work through. And these scales are on a 1 to 10, where 1 is terrible, 10 is outrageously good. And I go through and I assess each of these. Okay, so the first thing is assessing my health. I gave myself a 7.5 out of 10. And I think if I were to look back 12 months ago, that probably might have been closer to a 6 out of 10. One of the reasons for transitioning out of practice is, as much as I love spending time with my patients, bending over patients, even just a couple of days a week, was lousy for my lower back. 25 years of adjusting a lot of people has meant that when I'm in that forward flex position, my back doesn't like it. And I have had, even after resting, I get really stinky sciatica, and that has improved a lot. I've got some really good habits going in around home gym setup. I'm continuing to kind of expand into that. My eating has really improved, and I've been more consistent with it. So I love the direction where that is going as well. So I gave myself a 7.5 out of 10. Mental emotional. When I score myself on that, mental emotional is one of those vague terms. What I mean by mental emotional is really how much time did I spend in that emotional adulthood where I was being responsible for my life, versus how much time do I spend in that kind of emotional childhood where I felt like I was being more of a victim as well. So at the moment, it feels quite high. But as I mentioned to you beforehand, it's been one of the big challenges. So, that's probably at about a 7 out of 10 and sneaking up for there. But if we had have gone back a couple of months ago, it felt like a 6 out of 10 at that stage there too. Spiritual. This is something I haven't put a lot of time into of recent, and particularly this year. For me, spiritual, again, these are vague terms that might mean something different for me than to you. For me, the word spiritual is connection to something greater, whether you want to call it God or universe or whatever there. I haven't had a lot of that this year. I haven't had moments of really just stopping and dropping into and just being grateful for something bigger than me. And it is something that I want to focus on in 2022. This is part of why this process was important for me, because had I not done this and had I been thinking about 2022, I would never have set goals in around my spirituality and my connection. But just having this reconciliation, like I'm doing at the moment, the review, has pointed this out to me. It says, we're not as well-rounded in this area as what I would like to be. And so it's given me a real focus of where I want to go. Financial. I like where things are going for me financially. I have really lofty goals in terms of what I want to achieve financially. At the moment, Lauren is home on maternity leave, and we hope to have her home for quite some time. We have one practice now instead of two, and along the way, we've got beautiful chiropractors working for us out at the Lara practice, but we need to find another chiropractor in there too. So I've given myself a 7 out of 10 for this at the moment. So I'm very happy about where we are. I'm very grateful. I feel very blessed for our financial situation. But also I'm aware of some of the vulnerabilities that we have in around wanting to make sure that we're on one income at the moment as opposed to two beforehand and then needing more chiropractors. So I'm kind of really keeping an eye on that also. Then I've got this idea of learning and growing. Again, do I feel like I have learnt new things this year, and have I grown? This one here is kind of 8.5 to a 9 for me as well. I completed a life coach certification this year. I have grown into now being full-time in this role as opposed to being just in practice. I'm coaching one-on-one. I've got beautiful group coaching. I'm learning new communication methods. That's something that it's been a great year in terms of learning and growth for me. And then the final one on there is relationships. And I've broken these relationships up into 3 different categories. So friends and kids, children, and then my intimate relationship as well. So, my friends and kids, I both put those at 8.5 there as well. I'm making an effort, and not that seems like I have to really force it, but it's not. I've got some beautiful friends that I'm very, very grateful that I get to spend times with, the likes of my gorgeous friend Tony Rose, Martin Harvey, Tony Croak, Nicholas McSision. These are some of the important people in my life there. Billy Chow, who I get to kind of have time with often, which is great for me. The kids, again, I think I'm a great dad. In fact, I am a good dad, and I have great relationships with my kids as well. And transitioning, because it's very different having relationships with a 19 and 21-year-old as they are moving free. They're not wanting to speak with their dad multiple times a week. Sometimes it's kind of once a week that we check in as well. And then I have this chance to begin and learn again with Sunny, so that's high. And then with my gorgeous wife, Lauren, that's a 9 out of 10. I'm very grateful for that relationship. It's a constant learning for me. I love the openness and the honesty that we have between and with each other. I love the way that we are both able to apologise and admit when we're wrong and not hold on to a grudge. We definitely do sometimes rub each other the wrong way. I was moving Sonny's cot around the other day. I was frustrated because I was trying to move it from one room to the other. He kind of sleeps in our room at night and then back in his room during the day. And Lauren keeps on putting one of these pictures in the doorway. And I was moving the cot into there, and I sort of yelled from one room to the other, "Why do you keep on putting this picture in the doorway?" I was really cranky with her, and her response was fantastic. She said, "Why don't you have a cry about it?" And it was the perfect kind of pattern interrupt for me, because I really wanted to get annoyed with her. But her response of "why don't you cry about it" was enough to kind of take me out of the state that I was in at that moment and remind me it wasn't that big a deal. I could just move the picture. And I did. And I moved on as well. But that's a beautiful relationship as well. Okay. A few favourite quotes from books or courses or something that I studied as well. So my favourite book of the year, this is hard for me to pull it down to one, to this little book here called The Quantum Leap Strategy. It was written by Price Pritchard. It's a little tiny book. There are, let me see how many pages there are in it, like 50 pages, not even. It's interesting. I've started to notice a lot of recent that, most books are in that kind of 250 page mark. You pay your $30 for them, depending whether you're getting the hardcover or Kindle version. But most of these books could be 2 chapters. Most of them could be 50 pages. But I'm sure the publisher says we can't sell a 50-page book for $30, so pad it out. But this 50-page book was $30, and it was worth 10 times that amount to me. I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs from it, which is one of my greatest learnings of this year and something I need to remind myself of all the time. This is under the chapter of suspending disbelief. So the idea behind this book, just before I kind of get into this chapter, some context to it, is how do we grow in a way that's not just growing from level 1 to level 2, but how can we grow from level 1 to level 5? And a quantum leap is really what Price is talking about in there, okay? So this little page or chapter here is titled Suspending Disbelief. He says, okay, so you're skeptical. You're dubious about your ability to make a dramatic jump from U to U squared. That's understandable. You'd like to believe that you can pull it off, but you can't make yourself believe something. Either you believe it or you don't. And maybe you don't know what to believe. Anyway, belief is sort of like love or trust. You can't force it. So how should you handle this disbelief or skepticism? Ignore the doubt. Just don't deal with it right now. The fact is, you're not in any position to deal with it appropriately. First, you've got to gather some data. You see, doubt develops in a vacuum created by the absence of proof. If someone could hand you solid evidence proving that you could make a quantum leap, the doubt would disappear. Now, the trouble is, no one will hand you that proof on a platter. But consider this. You also lack the proof that you can't make the quantum leap. Most people have the wiring in their brains messed up. You've decided to doubt the wrong things, such as their potential, the ability to break through opportunities, and their chances for making a quantum leap. For now, if you must doubt something, doubt your limits. I thought that was really neat, because when we have big goals, most often what we tend to do, there's a tendency for the brain to doubt our ability to be able to pull off these goals. In essence, what he's saying there, you don't know that you can't do it, okay? So just doubt that. If you're going to doubt something, doubt the fact that you don't know that you can't. So I think I'm saying that right. I think you get the gist of it. He said it better. He's the author there too. But that's been profound for me as I've been thinking about growing my business, wanting to have more reach and connections in around the world there too, is that sometimes when doubt comes up, I just doubt the doubt. I guess that's probably what I'm trying to say there too. So that was one of the more important books that I read this year also. There are a couple of courses that I did. I did James Wedmore's Business by Design. I've been following James for a long time. I've bought lots of different bits and pieces. That's very much an online learning. For those of you that are perhaps wanting to expand your online presence, love everything that James Wedmore does. Beautiful man, full of integrity. Love the message that he has. And of course, I became certified as a life coach this year from the Life Coach School. That was a fantastic, life-changing thing that I did also. So to finish off, last question, what big dreams or outcomes did I move forward this year? Again, the coach certification is one of those big dreams that I had for this year. Sold the Practice was another one. And then 2, I had a couple of really great cohorts of students go through Video Influence 3 this year, along with some amazing people who inspire me inside the community influencer group there as well. So that's the year review, the end of year review that I do and have done as well. I'll have all of those questions for you on the web page associated. So it might not be on the notes inside the digital device that you're listening this to, but if you head back over to anguspyke.com/podcasts and then the episode number, which I think this will be 239, will be all of these questions. And I would really highly encourage you to go through them, pen and paper. It won't take you long. This is probably only a 30, 40-minute kind of journey for you to do. And I think it will provide some real clarity for you into 2022. And speaking of 2022, I'm going to have some episodes in there to help provide some direction in terms of goal setting. How do we make things happen? And what are the skills needed Too often we focus on the actions, writing out a really good strategic plan that's really focused on the actions, but there's a bunch of things that we need to kind of build underneath that if we're to be successful with our New Year's resolutions. All right, gang, that's it for me. Thanks for listening. Thanks for all that you do. Please keep on saving lives. Your community very, very desperately needs you. See you back here real soon. Happy New Year too. See you, gang. Bye. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out my Community Influencer Program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work with you to help you apply it, implement it, and systemize it. The Community Influencer Group Coaching Program is designed to help you increase your practice income, impact, and enjoyment. Join me over at anguspyke.com/join. That's anguspyke.com/join. I'd love to see you there.